You're listening to Parents You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood.
The complete guide to pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood.
Unfortunately, anxiety is something that plagues many of us and our little people. It can be mild, it can be moderate, or it can be really severe and quite debilitating. And it can be really challenging as parents to know how to support our little people as they navigate anxiety in whatever form it presents for them.
Today we welcome back our child psychologist expert, Dr. Deirdre Brandner, to talk to us all about this important topic. Dr. Deirdre has over 30 years of experience helping families and little ones with a multitude of problems. You may recognise her. She's quite often on morning breakfast radio or TV. And today she's going to talk to us all about child anxiety. So Dee, I guess the first question is, what is child anxiety?
Anxiety is actually a really normal part. It's a normal emotion that we all experience. So feeling worried or anxious is not something we can avoid. But as a psychologist, we become more concerned about it when it's impacting a child's life and stops them from doing the things they want to be able to do.
How can anxiety manifest, Dee, and what are some of the signs of anxiety?
So whether the child is very young, it can be really hard to pick up because they don't have the language to describe what they're feeling. So often it will look at symptoms or behaviours like headaches, sore tummies, teariness, avoidance, shyness. And sometimes we can even see it looking at in terms of irritability and anger. Behind a lot of anger, anxiety is hiding.
Yeah, I know. That was something I learnt later on in parenting, is that often, if anger is actually fear or worriedness or feeling hurt shows up as anger.
Yeah, very common.
Yeah, and so if our children are feeling those big feelings, Dee, how do we help them?
The first step in supporting worry or fear is having the language to be able to identify it. And that's why we spend so much time, in clinical practice, but also in classrooms and in parenting, is talking about feelings. Because the first step is being able to say, I'm feeling worried, I'm feeling scared. Because if we've got that information, then we can address the issue, come up with a plan and help our children navigate, this unpleasantness.
Sometimes it can be really hard to know what question to ask or how to ask it. How would you recommend that as parents we try and uncover what it is that is making our child feel anxious?
I'm a big believer in using stories, using play, to try to work out what we might be feeling or where this problem is occurring for our little people. And remember, sometimes our anxiety, even as adults, we have the feeling, but we don't really know what it is we're worried about. Remember, dealing with the feeling is the first step. We don't always need to know what the actual fear is. How we're going to navigate this horrible worry feeling is actually the most important thing.
Yeah, I love that, sort of name it to tame it, and that feeling of when you are feeling really worried. Sometimes just saying, I'm feeling worried, you sort of almost get a bit of relief. Do you feel that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so Dee, how do we work out what is worrying our child, particularly if they're younger and they don't have the vocab or they're not talking to you about what's happening at school, or you're not always there to know what is worrying them?
So, if it's something you can observe in your child, when you notice that they're shying away from a situation, where they're squeezing your hand tighter, or whether they're tearing up, getting red in the face, they can be some visual clues. I really recommend us having close partnerships with their educators or their carers, because if it's happening when they're not in your care, it can be helpful to have those honest conversations. Sometimes it's about walking past the school or the kinder and saying, oh, when you're playing, on those swings over there, what's that like for you? Or using language like, what was a tricky thing today? Tricky is a much better word to help our children open up. And then we can sort of dig a little bit deeper gently instead of saying, what's making you worried?
Yeah.
There are some common instances when children, exhibit anxious behaviour or feel worried, such as drop-off. What would some strategies be, Dee, for parents who might be dealing with an anxious child at drop-off in the morning, whether it's at daycare, kinder or school?
So the two things our children struggle with, and often us as adults too, is new and transitions. Going from something that's safe and familiar to something that I'm not quite sure about. So prevention and preparation. So practicing drop-offs when it's not busy. Having a transition object that you take with you. Focusing on the anchor of what you're going to be doing today. Providing them with adequate visual information of where you're going to be. So a big one is having, a photo of where you're going to be standing at pickup that they can keep in their bag. That's a really important prop for them to rely on during the day.
Yeah, that's a good tip, isn't it? And just that feeling of they are going to do what they say they're going to do, and you are going to be standing there, isn't it?
Yeah, trust is really important in helping us manage those worry feelings.
Yeah, and sometimes when you pick them up, they start crying then, isn't it? And then you're sort of like, how come you're managed to hold it together all day at school? Am I doing something wrong because you're suddenly seeing me and crying? Why does that happen, Dee?
That's a really common and normal part of how your child's beginning to enter into their safe zone with you. It comes not because they've had a terrible day, it comes because they've got this big feeling, and it can be a positive feeling, but it still comes with tears and wanting a hug and wanting that reassurance. So I feel like as a parent, welcome it. Throw your arms around them, give them a big squeeze, jump into the car or start walking home, and maybe even talking about what you did today instead of what they did.
That's a really beautiful tip. What about bedtime, Dee? The nighttime routine and then into bedtime. Sometimes that can be when children start to feel anxious for a whole host of reasons. What might some of these reasons be, and how can we support them?
So bedtime is notorious for when anxieties like to raise their head. It comes because we're tired and our brain can't think logically. We can't decide whether it's a real worry or just an idea that's floating in our head. So routine's really important for bedtime to help manage worry thinking. Often our children will have not mentioned the problem all day or all afternoon, but bring it up at night. And we can't problem solve and deal with worries at night. So I recommend us, having a little post-it note. You say, you know what? I'm going to write down your worry and I'm going to hold on to it for you. And tomorrow morning, we're going to come up with a plan. So I think that's really important, that we take the problem that your child thinks they need to solve. We don't try to solve it then, but we say, I'm taking care of it for you and we're going to fix it tomorrow.
I love that. And Dee, you've got a beautiful book, don't you, that deals with anxiety. Do you want to tell everyone a little bit about that?
I do. I have a lovely book called Do Bears Who Eat Blueberries Go Bananas? Because it's about a worry thought that gets stuck in Bear's brain and follows him around. And the message in that book, it comes from evidence-based research. It tells us you have to catch the worry thought, shake it up and throw it away, because worry thoughts don't like to get caught.
And it's so great. I read this often to my littlest one who's 6, and my daughter has a real problem like going to sleep sometimes at night, because just like all of us, I think it's the moment you're finally still and you can actually think about what happened in the day, and you might have got through the day, but then it's that moment that you're actually thinking about how you were feeling in that moment. And we were reading the book with him, and he immediately, when she was feeling worried, went and said, you need to go and do what the bear does. Shake it up and it will go away, and I just loved it because it really resonated with me, how children, have really great, imaginations, and they like to, be able to fix things with a practical solution, and I just loved it. So I love your book. I think anyone should read it if, they
amazing.
can.
Yeah, thank you. And I just think the idea of trying to put a boundary around our worry thinking, because it might have started with one worry thought, but then it grows and grows because we're tired, and then we start to worry about something else. I mean, even as adults, we do this.
Yes.
I tell my adults that have these conversations with me, if you get into bed at night and you're starting to worry about something, get a bit of paper, write it down. Yeah. We know that is a proven strategy that helps our brain switch off from that thinking.
What about new activities, Dee? Sometimes these can be things we worry about the night before when we've got something that's coming up the next day, or at the time when we're either leaving home to go or when we arrive there and we have that panic or that feeling of, we're feeling really unsure about what's ahead and how's it all going to go, what's going to happen. How can we support our children through those new activities?
When something is new, it's always going to have a tinge of worry or being unsure because we haven't done it before. And I say to my my clients and my nieces and nephews and even my grown-up children, being nervous or worried about new is okay. But when you say, what can I do to help prepare for that? Familiarity. So if it's a new activity that they're going to go on the website, walk past it, talk to other children who've done it, have some visuals that you can help remind your child of what we're going to be like. Anxiety doesn't like facts. So if you can give lots of facts of what the experience is going to be like, it can help reduce the sense of overwhelm.
Oh, that's such a good tip, and it probably leads into my next question around change. So say that your child is, moving through a transition, starting a new school, that can bring up a lot of anxiety. What are your tips around change?
So change is about looking at what's still going to stay the same. So if it's moving up to a new year level at school, or if it's going to a new soccer team that you're moving to, talk about what's still going to be the same. I think anxiety and worry helps us focus on the difference or the unknown instead of focusing on what we do know. So when I go to soccer, I'm still going to be wearing my soccer boots and there's still going to be a chance to kick the ball.
Yes.
Right? When I go to school, I'm still going to be sitting in a classroom. I'm still going to be learning. There's still going to be people in that room, children in that room that I know. So focusing on what we already know about a new situation can be really helpful.
With anxiety, Dee, if I've felt and experienced anxiety myself, does that make my child more likely to experience anxiety?
Great question. We know that there is some genetic predisposition, like lots of things, to anxiety. But anxiety can become contagious if we're not managing it ourselves. So if we are fearful and it comes out in our parenting style, our children can become more unsure about the world because, we're what they look for guidance and understanding. So if we're showing trepidation about something, your child will pick up on that. So, I'm not asking you, we can't, walk around with the calm, serene face all the time, but be very conscious of the underlying subconscious messages that you might be sending your children when you're fearful about situations.
Yeah, and that can work in the positive too, can't it? Like, I'm very fearful of driving on really fast roads, and the other day I was saying to my children, you know what, I am very fearful about driving on a fast road, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so they can see that it's okay. Even mum feels anxious too, but, she can work through it. I think that sort of gives them sometimes that bit of power themselves that it is normal,
Absolutely.
that even big parents feel anxious and worried sometimes.
Yeah, and I think using that language of, I'm a bit worried about doing this, I'm going to have a go, and I'm going to practice my, milkshake breathing when I'm doing it, or my bubble breathing, or I'm a bit nervous about doing this, so I'm going to play our favourite song in the car while I'm driving because that's going to help keep me calm. So acknowledging that us grown-ups feel it, we're still going to do it, and we're going to use these little tools to help us.
Dee, can you tell us about those breathing techniques that you've just touched on there?
So it doesn't matter what we call it. It's got lots of different names. But for children, I like calling it milkshake breathing. And we do this by practicing breathing like we're blowing bubbles in milk, in juice, in water. We take a big deep breath in and we breathe out slowly through the straw, so we just keep the bubbles in the glass. And practicing that, with an actual straw and some water, but also practicing doing that with just the straw and then practicing doing it without the straw. I can't tell you how many times that I've had to use my milkshake breathing.
I know, it sounds like something I'd love to use.
It does. And it works. It works because we know the first step with our breathing is to send a message to our brain that we are okay. So once we regulate our breathing, our heart rate resumes the normal pace and our brain can access that logical thinking instead of being in that panic, flight and fight mode.
Wow.
So Dee, obviously, anxiety is normal in some shape or form, but there is a point where anxiety becomes, stopping you, as you were saying, doing things that you normally like to do. How do we know in our little ones when it's time to get some help?
It's really important that we're in tune into the intensity of the anxiety, so how often it's happening and what the impact is. When it stops our children doing something that they should be able to do within their developmental range, and when you've tried a couple of these strategies and they haven't worked, having a chat with GP, your paediatrician, psychologist, or getting advice from a trusted source. Not everyone can get in to see a specialist, but there's lots of evidence-based advice out there that you can be implementing. Research tells us that if parents have the tools to support a child with anxiety, it's actually more effective than seeing a psychologist or even medication. So skilling ourselves up to help having the strategies to guide our children through anxiety, no matter how severe it is really critical to addressing this issue.
Oh, that's great. And is it something that you can write out? I don't know, is anxiety a developmental part of childhood, or is it more sort of how you're feeling and something that you do need to have those skills?
It's really important that we understand that anxiety is a normal emotion. And if we keep our world for our children too safe, too secure, they're actually never going to get the chance to experience anxiety, so they're never going to learn the tools. So when you mention writing it out, I need our children to having new experiences, tricky experiences, so that they can learn how to adapt, because we know that new situations happen all the way through the spectrum of life, and there's going to be new things, scary things, things we're not unsure about no matter what age we are. So let's get our little people learning those skills and tools now. We can set them up for life.
Oh, Dee, you are so amazing. Thank you for so generously sharing your expertise with us today. You've been listening to the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast. Never forget, parents.
You've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyou'vegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.